A humble woman, Mother Elisa, was returning from the market when she found an abandoned baby in a small basket by the roadside. The cry of the child cut through the quiet afternoon, awakening something in her long-numbed heart, a widowhood softened only by solitude and routine. But the shock that truly stole her breath came when her eyes fell on the cloth covering the infant. The delicate embroidery, the careful looping letters, was unmistakable. It bore the mark of her sister, Martyr, who had vanished from the village years before, leaving nothing but whispers and questions in her wake. Alika lifted the baby gently, cradling him close. She did not yet understand the threads that fate had woven around this child, or how her act of compassion would soon place her at the center of a bitter family dispute, forcing her to confront a violent grandfather and unravel a painful secret. The woman everyone assumed was at the end of her story was, in truth, standing at its very beginning. The dirt road stretched longer than usual that evening, the sun dipping behind tall palms and stretching shadows across Alika's worn feet. In one hand, she carried the wilted market bags, a few tomatoes, a handful of beans, a bar of soap. In the other, the tiny, fragile body of the baby, warm and still smelling faintly of blood and abandonment. He stirred in his sleep, tiny sobs, shaking his chest, and she walked steadily, though her own heart quaked. Each bend in the path seemed to carry memory. Each rustle of leaves whispered doubt. Villagers lingered on their doorsteps, husking corn or sowing in the fading light. When they saw her with the child, glances shifted between surprise, curiosity, and judgment. "Dono or Faelia?" her next-door neighbor asked, eyes wide. "Is he your grandson?" Alika paused. She could have said yes. She could have said, "I don't know." But instead she spoke with calm certainty. "He's just someone who had nowhere else to go." She offered no details, no explanation. Those who understood would understand. Those who judged could whisper. The child needed arms, not gossip, that she would provide. Inside her simple clay and zinc home, the air smelled faintly of soap and swept earth. Every corner held memory. Her late husband's portrait still hung on the wall, its edges yellowed with time. A room that had slept, in darkness since his passing, now glowed with the warmth of the small breathing life in her arms. Alika lit the oil lamp and set water to boil. She murmured soft prayers, words not memorized, but rising from deep within, ancestral and raw. Slowly, trembling yet careful, she undressed the baby. Every crease of fragile skin, every purple mark, every delicate sigh seemed sacred. She poured the hot water into a basin, cooled it to the perfect warmth, and washed him as though cleansing a secret. A second chance. Tears welled in her chest, not falling from her eyes but settling deep within, the ache of loss mingling with the joy of giving life her care. She dried him with a flannel sheet kept from her first child, a son born still, whose memory had lingered, like a quiet shadow. That night, the silence that had filled her home departed, replaced by steady breaths and soft cries. A new rhythm, a new hope. She laid the baby on her late husband's bed, adjusted the pillow, and sat beside him, hands resting in her lap. The oil lamp swayed gently in the night breeze. That child might not have been hers by blood, but he was already rooted in her spirit. He cried a few times during the night, and each time Alika rose quietly, warmed rice milk, and fed him with a wooden spoon as her mother had taught. With each sip, each tiny blink, she felt a presence returning to her from far away, a life renewed. In the dimness, lying beside the makeshift basket, she whispered, "If it was God who placed this boy in my path, then give me strength. Love I already have." The moon passed slowly through the window crack, blessing the moment in silent witness. Outside, the crickets sang. Inside, life had returned, and in Alika's chest, an old love was reborn, not through blood, but through care, fierce and unwavering. Morning arrived heavy with clouds, the day slow to awaken. Alika rose before the sun, drawn not by habit, but by the sound of gentle breathing beside her. The baby slept peacefully, arms lifted as though dreaming of being held. Perhaps he was. In the quiet, worn room, a new bond began to stitch itself, stitch by stitch, like the embroidered fabrics her sister had once left behind. She examined the few belongings from the basket: a torn piece of cloth, a strip of blue ribbon, and a small wrinkled note bearing two words, written in dark ink. "Forgive me." No name, no date, no clue. But the cloth told a story deeper than words. The red embroidery, M followed by 3 dots, struck her chest like a drum. The hand was unmistakable. This was her sister, Martyr, calling from the past. The village woke outside, but time inside Alika's home seemed paused, suspended between yesterday and today. Holding the child close, she felt the inexplicable pull of hidden memories, the familiar curve of a brow, the gentle rise and fall of tiny shoulders. She did not yet ask who his mother was. She did not yet seek answers. She chose love first, understanding later. For now, the baby needed a home, and she was ready to be it. By late afternoon, as she fetched water from the well, whispers followed her. Women paused in sweeping. Men cast sideways glances. But Alika walked steadily, baby tied to her back, as if he had always belonged there. She placed the embroidered handkerchief in a wooden box with relics of the past, faded letters, old photographs, the tiny bracelet of her lost son, each now a testament to a story stitched with care, loss, and hope. Before bed, she stroked the baby's hair, whispering, "Whoever your mother is, I will protect you. You will not be afraid." The candle flickered, then went out. Darkness settled, but with it came something brighter than fear. Hope, woven into the very fibers of a life that had once been shadowed. In the first days, Mother Alika avoided leaving her home too often. Not out of fear, but because this time was sacred. It was the time to take root, to let the baby feel that here, at last, was shelter. And she knew the tongues of the village could be cruel with a story only half told. But in a small village, even silence speaks. It only took her going out once to buy flour at Mr. Mofo's shop, with the baby tied to her back, for the eyes to begin, weighing down her steps. First came the long stares, then the crooked smiles, then questions disguised as kindness. "And that boy there?" Alisa asked Don Anan, holding a basket of bananas and ears tuned for gossip. "God gave him to me," Alika replied without raising her eyes. "God's been acting different lately," the woman whispered, leaving with a sideways laugh. No one said it directly, but everyone wanted to know, and each invented their own version. Some said he was her grandson from some lost child of hers. Others said she had finally gone mad, that the grief of her husband and stillborn son had turned her inside out, that she had found a doll in the brush and believed it to be real. Others, more malicious, whispered that she had stolen the child, or that she was raising a prostitute son. From every mouth a new venom, but from none a cup of help. There were those who pied her too. One woman left a portion of porridge. At her door, a neighbor sewed 2 cloth diapers and hung them discreetly on the fence, but that was all. No visits, no sincere questions, no embraces. Even so, Mother Alika carried on. She washed the boy's clothes in the stone basin, boiled water in the iron pot, chopped avocado leaves to make colic tea. The baby, whom she already called my little one, seemed to respond to that care with silent gratitude. He cried little, slept a lot, and sometimes smiled in his sleep, as though dreaming of a fairer place. One Sunday afternoon, she took him to Mass, at the chapel. She wanted to present the boy to the altar even without a name, even without a past. She wanted to give thanks in silence for the life placed in her hands. She dressed him in the only new garment she had saved for years, a gift she once received at her neighbor's child's baptism. And there she went in a blue dress, steady steps, and full faith dot at the chapel door. Father Malum looked at her with surprise, but said nothing. He made the sign of the cross and gestured for her to enter. The pews shifted with the eyes that followed her. She sat in the back as she always did. The baby slept in her arms, his fingers clinging to the fabric of her dress. When the choir began to sing, Elisa's eyes filled. It was as if the music itself was saying without words that love does not need permission to be born. After the Mass, an elderly woman approached holding a wooden rosary. She touched Alika's arm with gentleness and said, "Whoever tends to what is small grows before God." It was the only blessing she received that day, and it was enough to renew her strength. But the whispers did not stop. As the days passed, questions became suppositions, and suppositions turned into silent condemnations. Some of the village men said she just wanted attention, that it was loneliness, that it was the kind of thing a woman alone did to feel important. Others insinuated that soon the government would come to take the child away because she has no means. One afternoon, Donna Oilia, the neighbor across the way, came through the gate carrying a pot in her hands. She had brought chicken broth. She sat with Alika on the cement bench on the porch and said, "Looking at the baby, that boy there may not be of your blood, but he already carries your scent, your way of looking." Elisa smiled. A small smile, but full of meaning. Sometimes what isn't of our blood belongs to our soul. That day the two of them ate together, for the first time in months. The pot emptied, the sun fell, and the baby slept in both their arms. For the first time, the house did not feel so isolated. The village remained divided, but inside Mother Alika's home, a certainty was growing like a tree in the rainy season. It wasn't what people said that mattered. It was what the boy needed, and what he needed was love, true love. Love without name, without ties, but with roots. And of that, she had enough to give. Even if the world only knew how to measure what could be proven. Time passed and the boy grew little, by little like a plant sprouting in stubborn soil. He had no name yet, at least not one the world would recognize on paper. But for Mother Alika, he was everything the heart could call him. At first, he was my little one. Then he became my ray of sunshine, until one clear morning with a soft wind blowing. He smiled, and everything changed. She was in the yard washing clothes in an iron basin. Her hands plunged in water, her thoughts scattered across time. The boy lay on a mat under the cashew tree, watching the leaves sway as if they were dancers. And suddenly he laughed. A short laugh, pure, damp with milk. A laugh that rose from his chest straight into the sky. A leaker froze. The soap slipped between her fingers. Time itself stopped for a second. She turned slowly, as if afraid she might be dreaming. And there he was. The boy really was smiling, eyes half closed, mouth wide, little feet kicking the air as if dancing with the breeze. And in that exact instant, she felt the ground vanish beneath her. For along with that smile came a memory, a name, a breath of the past. Jonas. The name echoed inside her as if called from the deepest well of her soul. Jonas, the son who was born still 23 years ago. Back when Alika still dreamed of a house filled with voices. A boy she'd never heard cry, never saw, smile. She had only held him for a few minutes, wrapped in silence before he was taken away. And she never spoke of him again because the pain was too deep for words. But now this smile, that way of wrinkling his nose, of arching his brows. It was Jonas, or what Jonas might have been, and she felt that life was returning to her in another form. What had once been taken away without explanation. She sat beside the boy, dried her hands on her apron, and lifted him into her arms. He was still smiling, as if he recognized her, as if he knew this moment was more than an ordinary morning. She pressed him against her chest and murmured, "Benjamin!" The name came out from within her, tearing through an old veil. Benjamin, my child of sorrow, turned into strength. That was the name, no doubt about it. Benjamin, the one born of suffering, but carrying meaning. He hadn't come to replace anyone, but to complete something long left unfinished. A name with the weight of the past and the promise of the future. From that day forward, Mother Alika called him Benjamin. To anyone who asked, she answered firmly, "He is Benjamin, son of destiny," and no one dared contest it, for the name itself seemed to have been whispered by something greater. The bond between them deepened. Benjamin began to follow her with his eyes. When she hummed while cooking, he moved his hands as if trying to join in. When she wept quietly at night, he stirred in his sleep, as if sensing it. It was as if their souls spoke in a language the world could not understand. And Alika, though she had no milk in her breast, fed him with what she had. Rice milk, mashed banana, yam broth. But most of all, she fed him with presence. She was there whole for him. Every fever was a vigil, every sneeze a prayer, every gesture a new beginning. There were nights when she dreamed of Jonas, dreams where she saw him running among the mango trees or fishing with his father in the river. But in the dreams, he had no face. All was just a boy's shadow, a happy silhouette. Now when she looked at Benjamin, she felt that face had finally been revealed. It was not reincarnation. It was not replacement. It was reconciliation. It was as if God in his most silent form was stitching the loose threads of her story. Not with spectacular miracles, but with details, a smile, a name, a gesture of tenderness, as if to say, "I saw your pain, and I am still here." And so the room, that had once been a cemetery of hope, became a cradle of redemption. The clay house, which once echoed empty, no welled baby laughter. The smell of porridge, the warmth of new love, and Alika's heart, once as hard as dry ground, bloomed again, like soil that, though mistreated, still knows how to bear fruit. It was the rainy season when she appeared. The earth was still damp from the night before, and the air carried that sweet smell of crushed leaves, of washed soil, of something old being renewed. Mother Alika, as usual, was in the yard, shaking, cloths on the line with Benjamin tied to her back, laughing at the chicken's noise. The world seemed at last to be at peace, if only for a moment. Then she heard the crack of footsteps at the gate, a soft, hesitant sound, as if someone was stepping there for the very first time. Alika lifted her eyes. At the entrance stood a young woman clothed dirty from the road, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, and her eyes, the eyes. That was what paralyzed Alika. The woman's eyes carried that same deep brown shade. That same contained light, as if time had hidden someone's soul inside a new body. They were martyr's eyes, not the face, not the walk, but the eyes. And they trembled like those of someone holding more secrets than words. "Could you give me some water?" she said, her voice hoarse, nearly gone. Alika nodded and went inside to fetch the clay jug. When she returned, the young woman was standing still, staring at the baby now, babbling in his grandmother's arms of the heart. And there, before the water even touched her lips, her legs gave way. She collapsed to her knees, eyes wide, hands to the ground. "It's him," she murmured. "Who?" Alika asked, her body already cold with foreboding. My son stopped. The jug slipped from Alika's hands, shattering on the earthen floor. Startled by the crash, the boy began to cry. And in that cry, there was something different. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't pain. It was recognition. The young woman fainted. Alika caught her with the strength only someone who has carried both, the living and the dead, can summon. She laid her on the porch bench, splashed water on her face, found her with her apron. Slowly, the girl came to. Her eyes were still wet with despair, but now steady, fixed on the baby. "Are you Martyr's daughter?" Alika asked without hesitation. The young woman nodded, swallowing her sobs. "I am Nasha." The name cut through Alika's memory like a blade. It was the name Matera once said she dreamed of giving her child before she disappeared. "If I ever have a daughter, I will call her Asha, which means grace, even when there's none." Alikika sat down. The world seemed to turn slowly, as though everything she believed was being pulled out of place. "Is she dead?" she asked, her voice breaking. Nishap shook her head. "I don't know. I haven't seen her in years. She raised me until I was 12. Then she vanished too. I stayed with my grandfather." Alikika already knew who she meant. Their father, a rigid man with no time for tenderness, whose honor was larger than his heart. "And this boy," she whispered. Dot. Nisha drew a deep breath, as though preparing to vomit up an old pain. "I was raped by a man from the city. I was afraid of my grandfather, of shame, of the village, of myself. I hid the pregnancy as long as I could. When the time came, I ran. I gave birth alone, and I had no strength to go on. I left him there, on that road." She paused, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "But since that day, I haven't slept in peace. I pray to forget, but my soul calls me back." Alikika felt her stomach twist. She looked at Benjamin, now sucking his finger as though trying to understand the world around him. She looked at Nia Shah, and there between the two, there was more than a baby. There was an interrupted story, a pain stitched in silence. Her reunion destiny seemed to weave with deliberate care. Nasha rose slowly, her body still weak. She reached out her hands, but did not touch the child. Is he all right?" she asked in the voice of a frightened child. Alika nodded. He is alive. He is loved. He is where he belongs." The young woman wept again. And this time Alika did not hold back. She sat beside her and with a firm arm pulled her into an embrace. "If you are my sister's daughter, then you are my blood. And so is this boy." They remained there, 3 generations bound by pain, by loss, and by the miracle of reunion. That day nothing was decided. No one spoke of custody, of blame, of the future. They only allowed themselves to cry because before any decision, the soul needed cleansing, and that they began to do with tears. The sun sank slowly, and when night came, there was a single candle lit on the household altar. It wasn't for a saint, nor for a vow. It was just a candle burning to say that life was present there, that even after abandonment, shame, and fear, there was still a place where love knew how to kindle the light. The next morning, the sky looked clearer, but the air was heavy, as if it carried a truth about to fall upon the village. Inside Mother Alikika's house, the silence was thick, not born of peace, but of waiting. Nasha sat on the kitchen bench, eyes downcast, hands folded on her lap. Alika stirred the corn porridge over the clay stove, unhurried, turning the wooden spoon as if sewing time together, with patience. Benjamin slept, and he slept as if he knew he needed to give space for the truth to be spoken. "I've never told this to anyone," Nasha said, her voice nearly breathless. Alisa did not answer. She only turned her body slightly as if to say, "I'm listening." Nash drew a deep breath, her eyes fixed on some lost point on the wall. "He beat me. My grandfather, your father, he beat me when he found out I was pregnant. Didn't even ask how it happened. Said I was a disgrace. That a woman who dishonors herself doesn't deserve a roof. That I had killed the family name for good." Her voice faltered. The pain was still fresh. "Even if the events were months past, and it wasn't just once, he threw me to the ground, spat on me, called me filthy," said my mother. Your sister could only have birthed something. Rotten Alika felt her stomach churn. The old man had been harsh with everyone. But to cast out a granddaughter for something like this, to deny listening, deny an embrace, deny the truth, that was more than harshness. It was cruelty. I bled. I bled more inside than outside. Nasha went on. Eiffeld, hid in an abandoned field, gave birth at night alone with a cloth in my mouth so no one would hear my screams. She paused for a long moment, closed her eyes when I saw that boy in my arms. All I could think was that he would suffer everything I had suffered, that he would carry the same look of disgust I carried. So I did what I thought was right. I left him there, as if giving back a piece of destiny. I just didn't know God would place him in your hands. Alisa moved closer. She sat in front of her niece and took her hands. You acted out of fear. And fear blinds, but love. Love knows how to wait. It doesn't condemn you. It calls you back. The two stayed like that for long minutes, hands entwined, scars opened, but already being washed clean by truth. The coffee boiled on the stove, its smell spreading through the house, and the morning took on the bitter taste of revelation. By late afternoon, the inevitable came. A hard thud of footsteps at the gate, harsh voices, someone calling for A with authority. It was him. Malarkey, her father, the old man everyone in the village respected more out of fear than admiration. The same man who buried his wife without shedding a tear and never again spoke of the daughter who disappeared. The same man who now appeared with a paper in hand and a mouth full of arguments. I came for the boy, he said, stepping in without invitation. Nasha stepped back 3 paces. She hid behind a chair like someone searching for a shield. What? Alika asked, still unable to believe it. My grandson, he carries my blood. He will be raised as a man with a name with honor, not in this nest of shame and tears. The air thickened. Alika rose, placing herself between him and the baby. You cast out his mother, called her trash, denied the blood, and now you want to take the boy. For what? Her voice came out steady, low, but firm, because he is mine, and he will inherit what I built. The land, the name, he answered without blinking. You want an heir, not a grandson. Flesh, not soul. Blood, but not tears. Old Malachi flushed red. The veins in his neck bulged. I will not be challenged by a woman, especially not by a woman who takes in other people's children like stray dogs. Alika drew a deep breath, lifted her chin, then leave. Because in this house, what enters is not pride, it is love. Malachi hesitated. His eyes wandered to Nasha, who faced him with the strength of someone who had been beaten but survived. For an instant he seemed to search for something in his granddaughter's face, but he found nothing because what he had let die. She had reborn with other hands. Without another word, he turned his back and left. He did not look behind him. The gate slammed shut with force, like a period spat out by life itself. That night, Alisa lit 3 candles, one for Martyr, wherever she might be, one for Nasha for the courage to return, and one for Benjamin for the story that, though born of pain, would no longer be marked by abandonment. And while the boy slept, Alika stitched a new quilt using her sister's old cloths. Each stitch was a beginning, each thread a promise. For sometimes God does not give back lost time, but he gives a new time. The next day dawned gray with low clouds and an uncertain wind, the kind that cannot decide whether to bring rain or silence. Inside Mother Alisa's house, the air was also suspended. No one spoke loudly. No one made noise. It was as if all sound been set aside so the soul could listen more clearly. Nasha had stayed awake all night. She did not cry. It seemed her tears had already run dry from having flowed too much. She sat in the corner of the room watching her son sleep peacefully in Alaka's arms. His little eyes closed, his hands open, as if trusting the world, not knowing that the world had rejected him at his very arrival. "He smiles in his sleep," Nasha said, her voice breaking. Alikika looked at the boy and smiled as well. "He carries light even though he came from darkness." The two women exchanged glances, and in the depth of that shared silence, the unspoken question began to form. Who would stay with Benjamin? Who would raise the boy? Who would have the courage to say, "He is mine"? Nasha rose slowly as if carrying, on her shoulders, the weight of doubt. She walked over to the makeshift cradle of woven straw and old sheets. With the tip of her fingers, she touched her son's foot carefully, like someone touching a wound not yet healed. "I don't know how to be a mother," she said. "I was afraid, not because I didn't love him, but because I didn't know what to do with so much love and so much guilt at the same time." Alexa listened, her eyes moist. "Love, my child, doesn't come ready. It is like clay. We knead it. It breaks. We mold it again. And if we have patience, it becomes shelter." Nya Shah knelt by Alika's chair. She held her hand as if reaching for solid ground. "I don't want to take him away from you, but I don't want to run away again either." "Then stay," Alisa replied without hesitation. "Stay how?" the young woman asked, her voice laced with hope. "Stay as two women whom life tried to break, but who will now learn to rebuild together." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of meaning. It was the time the heart needs to accept a pact. "If you wish, I will raise him. But if you wish to learn, I will teach," Alisa said with the calm of one who has lived beyond sorrow. "I want to learn, but will you forgive me?" Nasha whispered. "It is not I who will forgive you. It is he when he calls. You mother for the first time." That afternoon they began a new routine. Alika showed her how to boil water for bathing, how to cook porridge without lumps, how to hum softly to soothe the fever. Nasha watched closely, hesitated at times, but followed. For the first time she did not run from the role life had handed her. Benjamin seemed to feel the change. He cried less, slept more, smiled more often. It was as if this triangle to women and a child was beginning to form a home. Crooked, patched together, but true. The following days were made of small miracles, a tooth breaking through, an awkward crawl, a mom that no one knew whether meant mommy or mama. And with each little victory, Nasha grew closer, not as someone who took Alaka's place, but as someone discovering her own. The neighbors remained divided. Some said it was madness that a child needed order, a father, a house with tiles and food from the market. Others, quieter, saw the transformation, and though they never admitted it, were moved. One Sunday morning, Nyasha woke before Alexa. She made the coffee, swept the yard, dressed Benjamin in a shirt she had sewn herself. It was a patchwork of blue scraps with crooked buttons and thick thread. Yet her eyes shone as though she had dressed a king. When Alika saw, she said nothing. She simply sat in the rocking chair and breathed deeply. "Today you were a mother." Naiha smiled without fear for the first time. That smile did not come wrapped in guilt. "I am your daughter, aren't I?" she asked in a voice almost childlike. "You are my sister reborn, and your mother, wherever she is, must be smiling." The two embraced with Benjamin between them, and in that embrace more than 3 people fit. The pain of a whole lineage, the forgiveness of one who had gone, the courage of one who had stayed, and the certainty that even without official names or stamped papers, they were building what is called family. Because family is not only blood, it is presence, it is choice, it is wounds healed by many hands. And in that clay house, with the smell of porridge and the sound of a child's laughter, life was finally beginning again. The sky brightened slowly on the day of the baptism. as if even the sun were waiting to see what would happen in that small village where so much had been hidden. It was a Sunday, like few others. Swept streets, gates decorated with palm leaves, and flowers gathered from the yard. The air carried the scent of fresh soap, the sound of pots clattering in the distance, and people cleansing their souls with expectation. At Mother Elisa's house, the bustle began early. Nash awoke before the rooster crowed. She bathed Benjamin with warm herbs and wrapped him in a towel she had embroidered with her own hands. It was the first piece she had ever made alone since her grittant had taught her to hold needle and thread. Each stitch bore the symbol of something she wanted to leave with the boy. Strength, blessing, root. Alika watched with the eyes of someone who had seen much, yet still marveled at the rebirth of hope. She put on her best cloth, tied a scarf over her head, and wore the necklace of blue beads she had kept since her wedding day. Today you go before the people, but more than that, before yourself, she whispered, to her grandson of the heart, who smiled as though he understood every word. The whole village came, not because they believed in the baptism itself. Many had not set foot in the church for years, but because there was a collective curiosity, a disguised respect, a desire to witness the ending of a story they had followed through whispers and silences. The small chapel built of red bricks and a crooked wooden cross had never been so full. Children in arms, elders pressed against their walls, women lined in bright cloths. Father Malum, his eyes serene and his hands worn by time, was prepared for the ritual. But no one, not even he, knew what names would be spoken. "Who brings this child?" he asked, his voice firm. "I do," answered Alika. "I do too," Nasha added. The priest hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "And what shall he be called?" Silence. The village held its breath. Some imagined the boy would be called Jonas, in honor of the lost son, or perhaps Martyr, in memory of the vanished sister, but neither name left Alaka's lips. "He shall be called Benjamin, for he was born of sorrow but became strength, and he shall also be called Zuberi." Nasha added, "Which in our tongue means strong as stone, because I abandoned him, but he did not break, and he did not forget me." The word sounded like a gentle thunder. No shouts, no explosive reactions, only a wave of reverent silence, as if witnessing a discreet miracle. The priest lifted the boy, poured warm water over his head, and said, "Benjamin Zuberi, child of life, of love, and of courage." A murmur rippled through the chapel. Those who once criticized now wept. Those who once said, "It isn't right now," saw beauty. Those who never believed in second chances witnessed one. After the baptism, the celebration was simple yet abundant. Pots of rice, stewed chicken, tamarind juice, and laughter scattered through the yard. Children ran, elders told stories, and the whispers gave way to blessings. Alikika sat in the corner of the porch, watching it all unfold like a film of her own life. Nasha danced with her son in her arms, clumsy, laughing at herself. Some said it was too much, that a simple ceremony would have sufficed without a feast, but no one there could measure how much that celebration was. In truth, an act of restoration. An old man approached one of those who had judged the harshest before. He sat beside Alika, not looking her directly in the eye. "The boy looks like you," he said, as if it were a compliment. "Yes, we shape ourselves. When we love," she replied. "Serene. And that name Zuberi. I've never heard it. It is the name of someone who survived what many would not have had the strength to endure." The old man nodded like someone who understood without wanting to admit it. When night fell, candles were lit, and the village slept in peace. But inside that clay house of affection, something was different. A feeling that the story had finally found meaning, that the names given were not just identities, but memories etched into the spirit of a boy who had been reborn twice. Benjamin, son of sorrow, son of new beginnings. Peace lasted exactly 22 days. They were days when time itself felt softer. Benjamin. Zuber slept with a calm chest. Nasha smiled with a lighter soul, and Mother Alika stitched new cloths as if she were threading the future together. The village, for its part, no longer whispered with malice. Now there was respect, curiosity, even admiration. Many said they had never seen a woman like Alika. Others, quieter, simply began to see in her what they once despised: silent strength. But the past, when left unresolved, has a habit of knocking at the door. It was on a heavy afternoon, the kind when even the wind seems tired. The dry sound of a motorcycle breaking the village's silence drew glances. Visits from outsiders were rare. When the dust settled, they saw old Malarkey climb down from the vehicle with his wooden cane and firm steps. Despite his age, his face stern, his chin raised, his eyes as hard as they had always been. He wore his best tunic and carried a black briefcase under his arm, the kind that announces trouble. The whole village froze. Malachi crossed the main street like a man crossing conquered territory. He greeted no one, looked at no one. He stopped at Alaka's gate and struck it 3 times with his cane. Nyasha, hearing the sound, froze. Her eyes sought shelter in Alika's, but her body was stiff as if her entire childhood had returned in a single instant. "It's him," she whispered. "I know," Alika replied, rising calmly. She opened the gates slowly, unhurried. The old man entered, without asking permission. "I came for my grandson," he said plainly. "He has a name," Alakika replied. "Then he came for Benjamin, or Zuberi, or whatever you call him." Naiha appeared at the doorway. She was pale, but she did not run. She faced her grandfather with eyes that no longer trembled so much. "Now you remember? He's your grandson?" she asked, her voice tight but steady. "I never forgot. I only thought he was better off without you near him." The words cut deep, but no one stepped back. "I brought the papers," Malarkey continued. "Birth record, land deeds, everything. I want him to take my name. He will be raised by me. He will inherit what is rightfully his." Alikika crossed her arms. "And what else will he inherit? Your silence, your disdain, the fear you spread through a house as if it were an heirloom. You don't know what it means to be a man." The old man answered, "That boy needs discipline, strength. He will become someone not raised here in this nest. Of weakness." Weakness. Alika stepped closer slowly, her face serene. Weakness is denying a daughter who was raped, spitting on a pregnant granddaughter, only returning when the boy is clean, baptized, loved. That is not strength. It is vanity. The old man looked at her but did not respond. His eyes wandered over the house, the clothes on the line, the smell of beans on the fire, and finally they landed on Benjamin, who was playing on the floor with a piece of wood. The boy looked back at him without fear, without affection. Just looked. "He will grow up and ask about me," Malarkey insisted. "And I want him to know he has a name, a legacy." "He will grow up and know he was lucky," Nasha replied. "Lucky to be loved even after being abandoned. Lucky to have 2 mothers. Lucky not to carry the coldness you carry." "You dishonor me," the old man muttered. "You dishonored life first," Alika answered. "But life is patient, and what it does not forgive, it teaches." Malaki pressed his lips tight. He placed the briefcase on the table. "There will be a hearing, a judge, the law. I want the boy with me." And he left without embracing anyone, without looking back, his cane striking the ground like a war drum. The whole village watched in silence, and when the gates slammed shut, breath returned to the house. Nisha collapsed to the ground, her body trembling. Alikika knelt beside her and held her tight. If he wants justice, then justice he will have. But this time life itself will be present at the hearing. because blood can give a name, but only love gives roots, and that Malachi would never understand, but the judge would, perhaps the world too, and Benjamin one day would understand it all. The hearing was set for a Wednesday. The news spread through the village like wind through dry grass. Some whispered that a leaker would lose. Others said old Malarkey had too many friends, too many connections, and no judge would dare go against him. But most only watched, waiting to see if this time the world would hear a woman with no diploma, no money, no powerful last name, only a heart full of story. The night before the trial, Nasha did not sleep. She sat beside Benjamin's cradle, holding his tiny hand as if trying to hold on to destiny itself. Alikika, meanwhile, prayed in silence. Not long liddies, not novenas, but short, simple prayers like an intimate conversation with God. "If I can't stay with him," Nasha whispered, "then at least let him stay with someone who loves him more than themselves." "He already has," Alika answered. "And today the world will have to recognize that. The day dawned with a clouded sky, but no rain. The courthouse hall was small, its walls stained by time, its benches of hard wood. Inside, Malarkey was already waiting. At his side, a lawyer in a pale suit with the look of a man who cares not for stories, only for arguments. Alikika entered with steady steps. Mia clutched her hand tightly. Benjamin, in her arms, seemed calm, unaware of the drama, as children often are when they have not yet learned to fear. The judge was a middle-aged man, bald, with a tired yet honest expression. Opening the file, he called for silence. "We are here for a custody petition filed by Mr. Malarkey, biological grandfather of the child, and a contestation presented by a leaker who claims to have cared for him since he was abandoned. We will hear the accounts." Malarkey's lawyer spoke first. He spoke well with grand words. He said the old man possessed land, wealth, financial means that he could provide schooling, health care, a future inheritance, that the boy would have a guaranteed future. When he finished, silence weighed heavy. The judge turned to Elisa. "And you, madam, what do you have to offer?" She drew a deep breath, smoothed the hem of her dress, looked at the judge, then at the boy, and said, "I have what he needs. Arms to hold him when he cries, warm food, stories at night, songs to rock him to sleep. I have wounds like his, so he will never feel alone." She paused, then continued, "He does not have my blood, but he has my soul. When he was left on the roadside, no one else heard his cry. Only I did. And from that day on, I have never let him cry alone." The judge turned to Nasha, who asked permission to speak. "I am his mother, and I failed. But I came back because I learned, and I am not here to take away what she built, but to learn from her. Together, we want to raise this boy, not out of pride, but out of love." The judge was silent for a long while. He looked at Malarkey, who remained upright, unmoving. "And you, sir, do you wish to say anything?" he asked. The old man stood. His voice came out dry. "I want him to carry my name." That was all he said. The judge closed the folder, took a deep breath, and then read, "The court decides that the minor, Benjamin Zuber, shall remain under the custody and responsibility of Alikika, with visitation rights and core responsibility shared with his biological mother, Nasha, both recognized as primary caregivers through effective bonds. The grandfather's role may be reconsidered in the future, should he demonstrate genuine interest compatible with the child's well-being." Silence. For a moment no one reacted, until Nasha wept. Then Alexa and even a court clerk discreetly wiped her eyes. Malarkey said nothing. He simply took his cane and left, for the first time with his head bowed. On the way back home, the village awaited them, not with flags, not with applause, but with smiles, with outstretched hands, with steaming pots and open arms. Dorno Alia brought cornmeal cake. a young village musician, played a soft tune in the background, and Benjamin in Alikika's arms clapped his hands, laughing as if he knew, even without understanding, that he was finally home. On the porch, Alika sat, with the boy in her lap. She looked at the sky, now clear, and murmured, "Today the world heard his cry, and for the first time it heard my voice to Dot." Justice had come, not only on paper, but in people's eyes, in respect, in the restoration of a name, in the recognition that love too is inheritance, and that sometimes the simplest hands are the most sacred ones to carry the destiny of a child. In the village, the story became legend, but not the kind told with exaggerations or lost in fantasy. It was a living legend, present on the sidewalks, at the waterspouts, on the benches of the markets. Each person told it in their own way, with details that shifted with emotion. But one thing was certain. Mother Alika, the woman who once returned from the market with an empty heart, had returned that day carrying destiny itself in her arms. Benjamin Zubbery grew, and he grew as trees grow when they have roots and care quietly, but with strength. He was a serene boy, one who listened more than he spoke. He had his mother's curious eyes, and his grandmother rub her heart's calm smile. From a young age, he loved stories. He would sit at Ale's feet and ask, "Tell it again, Grandma. Tell about the basket." And she would tell it, always the same way, always with tear-airy eyes and a steady voice. It was an old basket, but inside it was what the world had forgotten to value. Dot Nisha became a seamstress. She learned stitch by stitch with a leaker, and little by little the cloths of the house gained color, shape, life. Each embroidery was a portrait of what she had lived. Trees, paths, children's eyes. Her work began to sell at markets and later in other villages. People came from afar to buy the cloths of the girl who survived, not for the embroidery itself, but for the story they carried. And Alika remained Alika. She did not become mayor, did not write a book, did not give interviews. She kept rising early, sweeping the yard, preparing porridge and herbal tea. But now, she was seen. People passed by and greeted her with respect. Mothers kameto seek her advice. Children called her grandma, even without blood ties, and the men, once arrogant, now lowered their gaze with reverence. Once a newly widowed woman arrived in the village with 3 children and no direction. Alikika opened her door, offered water, and said, "No one chooses to lose everything, but you can choose what to do with what remains." The woman stayed. The children grew, and another story sprouted in that sacred soil of welcome. At school, Benjamin wrote an essay about the most important person in my life. He wrote, "My grandma did not give birth to me, but she raised me. She taught me that we are not what is done to us, but what we do with what was done to us." The teacher cried when she read it. She sent it to the village newspaper, and once again, Alaka's name spread, not as a heroine, but as living proof that love is what saves when everything else fails. And old Malarkey, he never returned. They say he sold the land and went far away. Some say he fell ill. Others that he died without asking forgiveness. But Alika never cursed him. She only said there are those born to teach through love and those who teach through absence. The years passed, but the memory of that day never left the heart of the village. The day a woman came back from the market with empty bags and found a life. The day a cry on the roadside became a song in her arms. The day a story of abandonment became a nest. And every time a child cries in the village from hunger, fear, or loneliness, someone says, "Take them to Alaka's house. There is always someone who listens because she never chose to have children. She chose never to let the world's children be without a mother." And so with simple steps, calloused hands, and eyes deep with memory, she wrote without pen or paper. A story no rain could ever erase. A story that begins with pain, but ends with redemption. If this story touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel. That really helps us keep bringing you real and emotional stories like this one. Thank you for being part of our